We have a recap of New York Giants training camp practice number 7. Several revelations came out that, quite frankly, are music to my ears. What are they? I'm going to tell you next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and we are bringing to you everything you need to know from New York Giants training camp. The Giants with 7 practices in the books now, and we are going to talk about some revelations that came out of practice number 7 that are, shall we say, music to my ears, or, beautiful art to my eyes, however you want to put it. But these are things that I was pleased to learn or see from the Giants practices, not just practice number 7, but just all throughout. So that's going to be the topic of today's program, which, by the way, is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, Giant fans, we're going to jump right into some of the things that were revealed that, quite honestly, I was glad to learn. I was glad to hear the Giants either admit to it or show or whatnot. So let's get into my takeaways. Not just from practice number 7, money, but again, throughout training camp, which is now about a week old for the Giants. So item number 1 that I'm going to start with, this is a big one, in my opinion, and that is the offensive line. Now, Brian Daboll was asked about the offensive line, if he plans to rotate guys like Joe Judge before him did, or does he ideally want to have 5 guys that are in there for every play. And if you recall, Joe Judge, the first year he was here, because of COVID, he rotated guys in and out because, they didn't really have much of a training camp and he was still trying to learn about what he had. Well, he continued that practice again last year, not as much as he did the first year, but he still did it. And when you rotate guys in and out on the offensive line, you don't have an opportunity for that unit to build cohesiveness and continuity. And I thought that was a big mistake. It's like pick 5 guys and just roll with them. So Brian Daboll was asked about that. And basically his response is, for training camp and throughout the summer, yes, they're going to probably rotate guys in and out because they've got to see what guys look like. If, say, for example, Andrew Thomas can't play, what do they have at left tackle? If John Feliciano can't play, who's the best option at center? So they have to fill out the depth chart. That's important, and that's fine. That's what training camp and the preseason is for. But once we get to the regular season, Daboll said his preference is to roll with the same 5 guys every week. And again, that is important because there is such a thing known as communication, both verbal and nonverbal. All right, so if Shane Lemieux is at the left guard, for example, he's going to probably want to get comfortable with how Andrew Thomas is functioning and thinking and how John Feliciano is functioning and thinking. Whereas if Shane Lemieux has to slide over to center for a couple plays, even though he's willing to do it and he's, he'll give it his all, now it kind of changes the dynamic because now he's next to Mark Lewinsky, who maybe, is somebody he hasn't practiced next to a whole lot. So he's got a new left guard to his other side there, probably Joshua Ezeudu. So it's important, in my opinion, that this team pick the 5 best offensive linemen and stick with it. And that seems to be what Brian Daboll, who, by the way, did have a stint with Bill Belichick, just like Joe Judge did, where, the rotating of offensive linemen was something that they did. Brian Daboll's going to stick with the same 5 guys, it sounds like, and amen to that. build continuity, let those guys gel, and don't play games. It's that simple. All right. Now, the next thing I want to talk about that was kind of music to my ears, if you will. Daniel Jones had another solid day of practice on Wednesday. So that's 2 good days in a row. The question was brought up by me about Daniel Jones and decision-making, because all too often we hear from coaches that when it comes to quarterback play, they're not as worried about, especially this time of year, they're not as worried about completions or interceptions or anything like that. They're concerned more with, is the quarterback making the right decisions? And, this is an offense, quite honestly, that isn't easy. It's very different from what the Giants ran in the past with Jason Garrett, and that there are a lot of options, a lot of different ways to go. It's almost like a diner menu, if you will. It's like, okay, do you go this way? Do you go that way? Do you want your receiver running this route? What are you looking for? So when you have that many options, obviously you have to make more decisions if you're the quarterback. So I asked Brian Daboll about how Daniel Jones's decision-making, particularly on the deep ball, which has always been a strength of his, how that is coming along. And I'm going to play for you the clip so that you could hear what Daboll had to say.
I think he's steadily improved since we got here. It's learning a whole new language. It's not just for Daniel, it's any young quarterback or new quarterback in a new system. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to handle. So he's making progress, but we're constantly teaching, and we're evolving as to what we do. We're trying to figure out what we do well too, what our pieces are, the routes that are good. There might be a certain route concept that we ran yesterday where after we tried it 3 or 4 times, I'm telling Kafka, let's just move on from that play. But we need to practice it to see if that's something that we're good at. And I think the quarterback has to have some input on that as well. So he's making improvement each day.
Now, also, I asked Daboll about Daniel Jones becoming more comfortable just slinging the ball around. And, I was basing this off of Tuesday's practice, obviously, where Jones basically looked really good. I mean, he only had 2 interceptions, and one was a result of the receiver falling down. The other was just a good play made by the defender. And interestingly enough, Daboll said, time will tell, and said that they're encouraged and whatnot. But again, he stressed the importance of making the right decision.
We want to make the right decision, but I also think there's an element mentally in a quarterback's head of the fear of failure or making a mistake. I think everything is really risk reward when you're talking about plays for a quarterback. Is the risk worth the reward? And if it is, let's go ahead. There's situations, there's players you don't want to throw at. There's a lot of things that go into that, but really what I want Danny to do is make the right play, make the right decision. Are there certain periods where we want to test the deep part of the field or see how the secondary covers? Sure, but for the most part, we want to try to make a good decision with the football and go on to the next play. If that's a 60-yarder down the field, it's a 60-yarder. If it's a check to a run. That's really what we're trying to get done with Danny, with all our quarterbacks.
Okay, so here's the thing, folks. Daniel Jones is making progress. I've said that all along. He is starting to get comfortable in this offense, which, as I said before, has a lot of different twists and turns and options for the players to pursue. Daniel Jones is making, at least to my eyes, from what it looks like to me, and granted, I don't know what the calls are. I don't know what the assignments are. I'm just going based off of what I see from when I stand behind the play. And, I'm looking at who's open and what's not. Looks like Daniel Jones is making mostly right decisions. There are a few balls that he, maybe he missed a wide open receiver a little further down the field, but he was still able to complete a pass. So that's some of the stuff that they're looking for from Daniel Jones. And he's doing a good job of that. And I want to stress something, ladies and gentlemen. I want Daniel Jones to succeed. I know there's a couple of you out there who think that I don't want him to succeed or I've been too hard on him. Here's the thing, folks. If he doesn't succeed, the Giants are going to go out and have to get a new quarterback. They're going to have to start from scratch with a rookie quarterback, which most likely means that this team is going to have maybe another year of rebuild in store while they get that rookie quarterback up to speed. I would rather Daniel Jones be that guy. All right. I would rather they use this year to evaluate, figure out what else they need. And then come next year, they've got Daniel Jones again back in the saddle, so to speak. And they can just play a lot faster in the second year in the system because they will have been familiar with it. So that's my hope for the offense. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, and they taste great. Built Bar offers 9 amazing flavors, a nut and nut-free variety, plus a rotating limited time offering of different flavors that changes up every so many weeks. So head on over to BuiltBar.com today to see what their current flavor lineup looks like and use our special promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off your first order. Again, that's LOCKED15 to save 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Welcome back, New York Giant fans, to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am your host, Patricia Traina. We're talking New York Giants training camp and several things that basically put a smile on my face when I learned about them when it comes to this football team. Things that have me excited, if you will. And maybe they'll have you excited as well as we count them down. So let's continue on. Wan'Dale Robinson and Cadarius Toney. Can we talk about those two young men? These guys, they're not your grandfather's receivers, right? You think of the old-fashioned receivers under the Tom Coughlin era, or going back to Bill Parcells if you're that old like me. The receivers just ran routes and caught balls, and they didn't do all this fancy stuff that you see receivers doing nowadays. But you watch Kadarius Toney, who on Wednesday, I think his workload was dialed back a little bit, but he's fine. You watch Kadarius Toney, you watch Wan'Dale Robinson. These two guys, in addition to being catch and run type of players, they're going to function out of the backfield as running backs, and you might even see them as quarterbacks in the Wildcat. Talk about versatility. I've mentioned this before, but if there is a running theme with this Giants roster, the word is versatility. The more you can do, the better. And Wan'Dale Robinson in particular, I thought had a really good practice on Wednesday. Not only was he catching balls and showing some signs of being able to be a runner, but he also threw a block. He sprung one of his teammates into the end zone for a touchdown. Now remember, Wan'Dale Robinson's only 5'8" and 185 pounds. You talk about a guy who plays big. He's it, folks. And he's, the best thing about it is he's loving it. He spoke to the media on the podium, and he is loving it. The more he can do, the happier he is. And he's got a smile from ear to ear when he talks about his role. And you could just see the excitement bubbling up. There's some things that he said we haven't seen yet that we will see eventually with what his role is going to be. And I think the same thing holds true for Kadarius Toney. So these two guys, folks, it's going to be very, very important for this offense. And, you talk about the creativity that Mike Kafka and Brian Dable are trying to build in the offense. You're going to see it, especially with these two guys, with the types of plays that they asked them to run. So very exciting stuff. All right, another thing that made me smile today. Kenny Goliday had himself a day. Now, here's the thing with Kenny Goliday. I know a lot of people were down on him, understandably so. He signed his contract. He didn't really produce last year. Part of it was due to injuries. Let's call it for what it is. But another part of it, I think, was he wasn't deployed properly in that offense. In this offense, I think he's going to be deployed correctly. But here's the other thing why Kenny Goliday, I think, got off to a slow start this summer. He missed all of the spring. Now, yes, he was in the meetings. Yes, he watched the film and did all that stuff. But this offense, as I have said before, is very complex in that a receiver has multiple options when they run their routes. So it's based on what the defense is showing them. How can they best beat the defense? So unless you're doing it, players always talk about mental reps. And I say mental reps, you could toss them because they're no good. I mean, they're just, seeing it is one thing, doing it is quite another. And I'm sorry, a mental rep is not the same as a physical rep. So Goliday, remember, he missed all of the spring. He has been working in the summertime. There have been days where he's had his workload dialed back a little bit, but now he's getting an opportunity to get out there and actually do these reps and watch them, see how the defense is developing in real time and make the decisions, sharpen up that decision-making process. So Goliday this week, at any rate, has had a much better week to start than he did last week when he was a little, off with some drops and some miscommunications and whatnot. But I think Goliday, ultimately, it's going to come together for him. I really like what he showed the last couple of days, and I think he's going to be okay. All right, Giant fans, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Life can be full of twists and turns that can really test our resolve. It's important to show up for yourself through it all. And if you need a little extra support, BetterHelp is standing by waiting to assist. Now, BetterHelp online therapy assesses your needs and based on your responses to a questionnaire and your preferences, they will match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. And if your initial therapist match isn't working for you, you can easily change it at no charge. All right, BetterHelp isn't a crisis line or self-help. It is professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime you need to send a message to your therapist. You know what, folks? You don't have to go through life's up and downs by yourself. Let BetterHelp be there for you. And right now, you can get 10% off your first month of service at BetterHelp.com by going to BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina. And you know what, folks? I'm really thinking about this. I taped a couple of player interviews this week. And initially, my plan was to write them up for Giants Country. I might bring one of those interviews into a podcast this week. And I can tell you who one of them is. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you guess. But it is a key player on the team. We're talking a starter, a defensive starter. Had an opportunity to speak with him today. It was a topic that we kind of, we talked football, yes, but we also talked about a little known fact about him and an interest he has, and kind of correlated it to football. So I think that might be the interview I'll share with you. I have to see how it came out because I did it today. I haven't had a chance to go back and play it back, but I might be able to pull some snippets out of it and have that for you. So you'll want to keep it here on the LockedOn Giants podcast, as well as we're going to preview the upcoming blue-white scrimmage. We're going to recap that. We've got so much we've got to do here on the podcast. It's like never ending, but you know what? I love it. I've been waiting for new content to talk about, and here it is. All right. We're talking about things that basically have made me happy to see from Giants training camp. Music to my ears or pleasant sights to my eyes. And I have one last thing that I want to bring up. And I think this is a very important point that hasn't really been talked about a whole lot. And it's huge. And that is every key player, knock on wood, this is, all right, let's knock on wood. Every key player has been out there practicing. So what do I mean by that? Well, the injury bug has come along. I mean, look, guys are going to get sore and whatnot. And the Giants have missed a few guys. Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end, hasn't been out there in a few days. John Feliciano was sidelined for a few days. Today, Robert Foster, Antonio Williams, Cadarius Williams, they were all sidelined. But for the most part, the major names, the Blake Martinez's, the Saquon Barkley's, the Wandel, the Cadarius Toney's, the Kenny Goliday's, the Daniel Joneses, anybody who had an injury last year, they've been out there. And these guys, they've been able to do something. Maybe they're not taking their full reps all the time, but they've been able to do part of their reps. And that is important because, maybe in the past, the coaching staff might have said, you know what, we got a month ago before the season, we'll put Kenny Goliday on the shelf. Why risk him getting injured again? Well, why put him in bubble wrap? If he could go out there and do some of his reps and his individual unit drills, why not? You put him in bubble wrap or you hold him totally out. And to me, that's just silly because he gets rusty. And, Brian Daboll and the medical staff this year, they have been very crafty with the plans for these guys so as not to overload them. He's backed off of some of these guys when need be. And knock on wood, and gosh, I hope I'm not jinxing this team, but knock on wood, they haven't had any major injury issues. So let's hope, fingers crossed, that the Giants have finally figured out how to keep the injury bug at bay. Because, folks, last year, I think the Giants, if I'm being honest with you, I think sometimes they went a little too hard in practice. I know that sounds weird because you're supposed to go hard in practice, but you can't run guys to the ground. And I think the pace and the tempo that Brian Daboll has them practicing at, he's not running them into the ground, but at the same time, he's ensuring that they get the conditioning in that they need so that they can hit the ground running and be ready for week 1. So I really like that. I hope it continues. And I hope the injury bug stays away because the last thing they need is for a key player to go down either for, a few weeks or God forbid the season. And, look, I get it. Sterling Shepard's still on PUP. You've got Nick Gates on PUP, Matt Peart. Azeez Ojulari is on NFI. It sounds like he's going to be, like I said, he's week to week. But the injury situation, knock on wood, has been good. And let's hope it stays that way. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. I want to thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Make sure you keep it here all week. Like I said, I'm going to probably see if I can dust off that player interview, maybe run it on tomorrow's show. I've got to listen to it and see if it's suitable, the audio is suitable for podcasting, because I did tape it in the field house, which is where they had me work with the player. So we'll see if that one works. We'll preview the blue and white scrimmage. We've got so much coming up here on the LockedOn Giants podcast, and I do hope you will keep it here. So until tomorrow, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you then.